Spillers, founder of Experience Dynamics, and it's time for this week's UX Power Up. So today we're talking about labeling systems, which falls into the category of content usability. So labeling systems are those things that give the user attention or direct them to the things they can do on the page typically. And one of the biggest mistakes that companies make, one of the most obvious ones, is the product or service name, the branded name, gets put into the link. So when a user looks at that, they say, oh, what's that? That doesn't mean anything to me. And usually that language is in the format of the way that the company feels is comfortable, but not the user. So the user has a cognitive dissonance with that, or kind of thing. So let's talk a little bit more about labeling systems as they apply to three different areas. Headers, buttons, and error messages. So headers, that's one of the easiest and most common ways to help a user and to clarify a task. So you might write a small piece of text that's usually 3 to 5 words of a header label above an area that a user might interact with. So for example, if you have functionality here, you're going to have your label there, and that label will tell the user what they can do in a few words. The next one is buttons. So buttons are those objects on a page which usually represent a user's actions, the actions they can take. And with buttons, or with major actions, or even with links in general that you want a user to click on, it's best practice to label those buttons or those action links with a verb instead of a noun. So verbs are easier for users to process and go, oh, that's what I need to do on this page. It's a verb. So using verbs with buttons. The third one that is quite common is the error message. And there are some fun and funky error messages that you've probably seen, the 404 kind of page when a page doesn't load or it's the wrong page on a site, and you see the snap or the all, or and there different sites will use different drawings or kind of ways to kind of lighten up that landing. And it's that emotion that I wanted to point out with error messages, because a lot of our history in software development tells us that you need to be serious and say fatal error, or some type of serious system-oriented language, or some level of formality or seriousness. And studies, for example, at Stanford University have shown that humans actually relate to computers exactly as they do other human beings, and that means that the language that you use on your website should also be informal and reflective of that kind of social interaction. So informal language is always better, depending on the task or the situation that you're providing that error message or that help text or whatever it may be. It's similarly to headers or to buttons as well. That language should be appropriate for that task, but it can be informal so that it has a better level of acceptance from the user. So talking about labeling systems this week, and the real trick and challenge with them is actually thinking about your users and the words and the language that they use, and then you'll get a better labeling system if you bring that language and labeling in instead of using your company's world or their cultural labeling systems. That might be for headers, it might be for buttons, which are calling action through verbs, and it may be through error messages, which have a more informal and softer tone than the old system fatal error stuff of the 1990s and earlier on. So I'm Frank Spillers, and hope to see you next time on UX Power Up.